Greetings to all. My name is Evangeline Anderson. This is my presentation for Psych 499 Senior Seminar with Dr. Herzog. The topic of my presentation is sensory memory. Sensory memory is the stage of memory that registers information from the environment and holds it for a very brief period of time. This definition comes from our class textbook, Discovering Psychology, by Arthurs Hockenberry and Nolan, 2019, page 188. As we learned in Chapter 3 with sensation and perception, our senses is what helps us understand the outside world, understand our environment. We have 5 senses: touch, taste, smell, sight, and hearing. Without these senses, we would not be able to interpret our outside world. With these 5 senses, they help us remember things. On this current slide, I have the multi-store memory model by Atkinson and Chiffron from 1968. When you look at this model, it has environment input. As I stated in the last slide, our senses, our sensation and perception help us memorize things. From environment input, we have sensory memory. Whenever we remember something, it's because of our senses, and sometimes we remember things long term, sometimes we remember things short term, sometimes we remember things sensory wise. And sensory wise is the very shortest type of memory. So when you hear sensory memory, you would think of something like peripheral vision or peripheral hearing, anything that you see or hear or touch, but it's not a strong enough memory or input for you to relay to the next part of your memory, which is the short-term memory. Your short-term memory comes after your sensory memory. Your short-term memory is something that holds weight in your brain. It has some type of importance to you. It has some kind of importance or familiarity, and you remember it for a short period of time with, the attention that it has to you. After short-term memory, you have long-term memory. Long-term memory is sensory memory and short-term memory combined with rehearsal, attention, and consolidation. The repetitiveness and rehearsal of whatever you sensed or memorized with your perception. I will now take sensory memory and apply it to the real world. With my application of sensory memory to the real world, I just wanted to take everyday activities that I know my peers could relate to and just get them to think about it in a more memory way, if I explained that well. So, the first example that I have is driving a vehicle. When you're driving a vehicle, you push the start key button, you put your key in, you get it out of park, you put it in drive. Okay, now that's long-term memory. We all know how to drive the car. That's why we have our license. This long-term memory. You're driving on the way to school or work or wherever you need to go. That's either long-term memory or some short-term memory, depending on if you're using GPS or not. Now, here's where the sensory memory comes in at. You're driving, but you're not really paying attention to what you're driving by. You may see a tree, you may drive past a tree, but you're not going to remember exactly what the tree looks like. You're not going to remember how tall it is or the color of the tree, whether it was skinny, whether it was big. It's in your peripheral vision. You're not focused on that. That is an example of sensory memory. If someone were to pull you over and ask you, hey, did you just drive past that tree? Could you tell me what it looks like? Could you tell me how many branches it had or what kind of tree it was? Your sensory memory is not going to allow you to do that because it was nothing important for you to memorize. Listening to a lecture is my next example. We're all students, we have our professors and they lecture to us all the time. When it comes to our professors' lectures, and I feel like as students we all tend to do this, when it comes to lectures, we choose to have selective hearing sometimes. We hear what we want to hear. And when I say that, it's not such a bad thing, but we hear what we need to hear. Let's say the professor is lecturing about child adolescence behavior, you know, and they're telling us that they're lecturing about the vocabulary terms, what's going to be on the exam, what do you need to know about adolescence. When the professor starts getting into uh, personal stories about their children or when they were adolescents. Sometimes our brain will tend to turn that switch off and we'll stop listening at that point because that's not important to what we need to know for the exam or what we need for our homework or our class assignment. It's an example, but it's not important to what we need to pass the class. Us not memorizing that teachers' personal stories, that would be an example of sensory memory. Because, hey, we know they told a story about their kid, but we can't tell you word from word. We can't really tell you what happened with the kid, but we can tell you what's going to be on this exam. Our memory, we memorize what's important to us. Another example that I want to use is meeting new people. Let's say, imagine you're going to a party or you're going to a function where it's going to be a whole lot of new people. You're going to see a whole lot of new faces. You're going to meet a whole lot of new people. You're going to hear a whole lot of new names. You're not going to remember all of those people. You're not going to remember all of those names. That is your sensory memory. You'll see faces, but you won't see names. It's for a brief second, you'll know that person and that name for the time that you all are talking, and then the next you're on to the next person. You're not going to remember the first person that you met, and then when you go to the third person, you're not going to remember the first nor the second person that you met, and then the fourth person, you're not going to remember the first, second, or third, and it goes on and on and on. When you're meeting multiple new people at once, it's very hard to memorize everyone. For that split second, you'll memorize their face and name. And after that, you won't because you're so focused on what you're doing at this moment. Now you have to meet this next person at this moment, and the next moment, and the next person. It's a repetitive thing that you'll be doing, and your sensory memory won't allow you to remember these people unless these people are important. Let's say you meet a new person and they're a psychology major like you. Okay, great. You're a psychology major and they're a psychology major. So that one thing that you all will have in common will help you memorize them in your short-term memory because, hey, that's important to you. Y'all both have something in common. Say you meet a person, you guys don't have nothing in common. Y'all shake hands, y'all talk for a few seconds. You're not going to remember that person. There was nothing important. There was nothing that made them grasp your attention. I thought these were great examples because, like I said, I feel like my peers can relate to this. And that is the end of my presentation. Right here, I have my references page. I won't read this off because you can read this here. We have our textbook from class. Then I have a website where I got the Atkinson and Schifrin multi-store memory model along with the hyperlink underneath it in case anyone wants to click the link and learn more in depth about the model. Thank you for watching my presentation, and I hope you all enjoyed.